Hello, Perry the Platypus, and to all the members of the audience. My name is Serrano Imperial. I'm a T-Rex VTuber for anyone who doesn't know me, and welcome to my down fact on Dr. Doofenshmirtz's favorite dinosaur, Concavenator. Concavenator is a carcharodontosaurid from early Cretaceous Spain, specifically from the La Forguina Formation, which I definitely mispronounced, standing in at around 5 to 6 meters long and 3,200 to 400 kilograms in weight, which isn't exactly small, but when you remember that it's a carcharodontosaurid, which means its closest relatives include the likes of Carcharodontosaurus or Mapusaurus and Giganotosaurus, who's officially the second largest known theropod to date, Concavenator by comparison sure does look puny. But let it be known that Concavenator is a short king, and for two big reasons. One of them is that even though Concavenator was smaller than other Carcharodontosaurids, it was the largest carnivore of its respective ecosystem in the La Forguina Formation. Again, I'm hoping I pronounced that right. But essentially, its environment was a lacustrine environment, meaning it primarily shared its home with fully or semi-aquatic animals like fish, semi-aquatic reptiles like turtles and some crocodilomorphs, and also some fellas that aren't quite semi-aquatic, like birds or pterosaurs. And among all the carnivorous ones known, Concavenator is the largest one, of the ones that are definitively known. And when it comes to definitively known dinosaurs here, we only have two, one of them being Mantillosaurus, a fairly lightweight iguanodontian, at around 6 to 7 meters long and 750 kilograms in weight, a little bit larger than Concavenator. And the other one would have been more semi-aquatic, that being the ornithomimid Peleocomymus, who, as its name would suggest, it's a little bit similar to pelicans due to its throat pouch, and due to the fact it also had teeth, which was unusual for ornithomimids. It was likely built for catching fish along the edges of the water, which would have been close enough for Concavenator to get a lightly built snack if it didn't feel like attacking adult Mantillosaurus that day. And this helps to show why it wasn't a sauropod killer like many of its other relatives were. It didn't really need to be because there were no sauropods in its environments. If it was a megatheropod like its relatives were, it would have eaten itself out of house and home. So really, Concavenator was exactly the perfect size it needed to be, just large enough to handle its local potential prey and other carnivores while not being so big it would upend its own ecosystem. So to summarize, despite not being as big as other Carcharodontosaurids, it was still an absolutely top predator for its specific ecosystem. Now on to the second thing that you should remember about Concavenator that makes it a short king, is that while its relatives are again still a lot bigger than it, something that Concavenator has that other Carcharodontosaurids don't have is drip. I'm sure you noticed by now Concavenator's distinct sail on its back as one of the most eye-catching parts of this specific genus. It's not the only Carcharodontosaurid to have a sail though, as the more well-known Acrocanthosaurus also rather famously has a sail of its own, but while Acrocanthosaurus' sail is longer, its sail is the proportionally shorter one, while Concavenator's has a taller peak. And not only that, but its shape is rather distinct. Not even just amongst sail-backed theropods, but sailed-backed dinosaurs and sailed-backed animals in general. If you were to line up every sailed-back animal to have existed throughout time together, Concavenator would still stick out amongst the bunch, as one of the most uniquely shaped creatures out there when it comes to its sail. Concavenator's drip isn't just cool, it's one of a kind. The only other dinosaur I can find with a similarly weird sail would be Ichthyovenator, a spinosaurid with a fairly large sail similar to Spinosaurus itself, except with the distinct feature of having a small dip in the middle of its sail. So was there a reason to bring up Ichthyovenator in particular besides the fact that it also has a weird sail? Yes, there is, and that reasoning is that there's only so many times I'll be able to make the joke that Ichthyovenator and Concavenator sails look like they would be perfect puzzle pieces for each other. And depending on how you pronounce Ichthyovenator's name, if you pronounce it like me, then, well, it's also a good opportunity for another Dr. Doofenshmirtz joke, and you can't pass up on those. Well, unless they do an Ichthyovenator dino facts. Maybe. Well, back to the main point. Concavenator, in short, has some pretty cool drip with its tail, but did you know it could have had more drip? Specifically quills? Potentially feathers. On the arm bones of Concavenator's only known specimen to date, we did find some interesting little knobs on them that seemed to be quill knobs, and if true, they would have, as their name suggests, reported quills on their arms that were likely used for display purposes, and at least some people speculate that potentially they could have been a little more feather-like in life. Of course, there's a bit of backlash to this idea, with some people arguing that they might not be quill knobs, but instead muscle attachment points. But I personally am not quite convinced, as the most recent paper I was able to find on this subject was from all the way back in 2017 to 2018. A paper was done researching Concavenator's anatomy to see if they were muscle attachments. It was written by now Dr. Elena Cuesta Fildago as part of her doctorate thesis. Congrats on your PhD, and apologize if I mispronounce your name. And alongside her were two of the people that described Concavenator, Francisco Ortega and Jose Luis Sanz. I probably mispronounced your names, I'm so sorry. But basically, they found actually that the bones were distorted from where they were originally, and the quill knobs where they were would have actually been rather weird for muscle attachments based on what we currently know from theropod muscle anatomy, which, as of now at least, proves that particular counter-argument wrong. Or at least really puts it into question until we get more Concavenator fossils. The next big problem is that Concavenator and Carcharodontosaurids in general are part of the Carnosauria group of theropods, which do not have much evidence of specific feathering or other coverings like those. Meanwhile, the other group of theropods, Coelurosauria, which includes Tyrannosaurids, Dromaeosaurids, Troodontids, and birds themselves, obviously have a lot more evidence going for them in regards to having feathers. However, pterosaurs, despite the fact that most people should know they're not dinosaurs, they are fellow archosaurs. And we know for a fact that pterosaurs were covered in these small hair-like structures called pycnofibers, which some scientists speculate nowadays that they might have gotten them from some early floofed archosaur ancestors that dinosaurs likely also inherited that trait from. And within the Ornithischia group of dinosaurs, which are farther away from birds than Carnosaurian theropods, and despite the fact that most of their members did not quite have protrusions like feathers, some early members like Tianmulong, a fuzzy heterodontosaurid, and the Neo-Ornithischan Culindrodromeus, they both were found with coats of protofeathers, and the early ceratopsian Psittacosaurus has a rather distinct set of quills on top of his tail. So to summarize, even though the phylogenetic tree I made is definitely not the best way to describe it, in short, Coelurosaurian theropods, we know for a fact most of them had feathering and similar coverings, and we know that pterosaurs had pycnofibers that they most likely obtained from early floofed Triassic Archosaurian theropods, and we know that most likely Ornithischan dinosaurs were able to obtain these too, either through inheritance or maybe they regained something similar through convergent evolution. So stands the reason that the Carnosaurian theropods were closest to the Coelurosaurian theropods probably had at least some kind of special integrants, whether they be feathers or maybe something more like the Ornithischans, like proto-feathers or quills within their tens of millions of years. At least some members probably had something like this. And support for this idea has been showing up more recently in paleo media, like the game Prehistoric Kingdom and the documentary Surviving Earth. They've presented the speculative idea of certain large Carnosaurians having fluff, at least as juveniles, and unlike most of them, Concavenator in particular actually has direct evidence from fossils pointing in the direction of them having these kind of integraments. While I personally feel that the idea of them being feather-like in life might be a little bit too much, I've made it no secret that I'm definitely on the side of Concavenator having quills, but I acknowledge we can't say anything absolutely definitively until we find more arm fossils. And if one day Concavenator's quills happen to be taken away, we can at least say that similar to heavily feathered Tyrannosaurids, that quilled Concavenator would be a pretty cool look within its history, and no matter what, they can never take away Concavenator's awesome sail away at least. So in short, even though Concavenator wasn't exactly the sauropod-killing, record-breaking megatheropod that its relatives were, Concavenator was plenty cool without stats. It was the top predator of its own rather unique and interesting ecosystem, and it has style points over its relatives every day, every week, of every month, of every year. That's all I have to say for now, and thank you so very much for watching. Okay, but just before we actually head off, just want to say big thanks to all the support on the recent DinoFact videos. I appreciate all the support on them. Glad to see you guys all like them. I'll do my best to keep up the bi-weekly schedule for all of them. Pinky promise, and bye-bye for real.